What's wrong with being confident?
Welcome to The Art of Improvement. I am Giovanni Marotta, and of course with me today is Karen Klaus.
And another great special guest today.
But there was one thing missing.
What?
I didn't see his guitar. But I
Oh,
thought he
no,
was
I should have
singing.
told him. I know, I should have told him,
God,
bring the guitar.
Karen, we gave you one thing to do this week.
Sorry.
Gosh.
I only have one or two things to do every single day, and I can't believe I forgot one. Mr. Randy Carroll, thank you so much for coming.
I'm excited to be here. I didn't know I needed to bring a guitar. I wouldn't have brought one.
Guess what? Neither did I.
I would not have brought a guitar.
Randy, you got to tell everybody, you're iconic in San Antonio. The morning show on KJ for how long?
I've been at KJ 97 for 34 years, most of that on the morning show.
That's unheard of. It's crazy. You've got, me, Giovanni, I've been on the radio, and it's pretty unusual to stay at a job for more than 10 years. I mean, that is like, what? Who are you with?
So what were you originally hired to do at the station?
The very first job I had at the station was more than 34 years ago. It was the first year KJ 97 was on the air, which would have been in 1981.
Can you believe that?
Oh, wow.
Can you believe that?
What grade was I in?
I was hired to work 2 overnight shifts on the weekend for $5 an hour.
Yeah. Hey,
That
how
was
did you
my-
get so much?
That was my first job. I worked midnight, Friday night at midnight to 6 a.m. and the same thing Saturday night. So basically Saturday
How long
and
did
Sunday
that
morning.
last?
That lasted 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left and took a full-time job at a Christian music station, which was called KMFM. It was basically like a soft rock Christian music station. I worked there for a year and a half, and during that time I got 3 different offers to come back full-time to KJ 97.
Nice.
And the third one I took and came back, and my first job, I was either working midday. I think I was working middays. It was middays or afternoons. That was back when we had tons of DJs. I mean, you had the morning
Real DJs.
You had the morning guy work from 6 to 9. You had a guy to work from 9 to noon. One to work noon to 3, and one to work 3 to 6. Then a guy worked 6 to midnight, and a guy worked overnight. And I think my first was noon to 3. Was my first.
What year
on-air
was that?
job. That was November 16th, 1983. Was my first day on the job.
Wow.
Can you believe that? I mean,
And that was at KJ.
That was at KJ 97. Yeah.
it's incredible because if you know radio, you know that it just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't happen that way.
So is that what you were wanting to do early on, is go into radio?
No, I really wasn't. I knew I would probably do something in the entertainment field. I always loved music, and I always loved country music, and I always thought, well, maybe I'd do something. I always had a dream of being a country singer. But I just happened to end up in radio.
So did you make a run at becoming a country singer?
No.
I saw the pictures.
Not a serious one. Not a serious one.
What do you mean, what pictures? I don't know about the pictures.
By the time I actually thought about it, I was already, I had a good job. I was married,
Right.
had little kids, and it was like, this is probably
Not gonna work,
Yeah,
right.
not
working.
going to work right now. Yeah, but when I was in high school in Pleasanton, I was a junior in high school. I was looking for a part-time job, and one of the teachers said, "Hey, I saw an ad. They need somebody to run errands and take care of little things down at the radio station here in town." I'm like, "Oh, that might be interesting." So I went down, and that was my first job in radio. Because I'm not one of those guys that grew up dreaming of being on the radio or something like that. And so I took that job, and within a couple of years, I basically ran the little radio station there in Pleasanton. And during that time, I met a lot of radio people in San Antonio. Greg Simmons from Channel 10. Greg was a radio guy at that time. He was doing radio news here in San Antonio, and he would come down there and moonlight from his regular radio job doing sports broadcasts on our little station.
Oh, my gosh.
So he would go out and do play-by-play on the Jourdanton Indian baseball team or football team or whatever, and same thing for Pleasanton and Poteet. And so I met guys like that. And so when the program director at the old K-Buck radio station was looking for a part-time DJ, Greg and some of those guys said, "Well, you need to call this kid down in Pleasanton. Let him, and that's how I ended up getting my first radio job here in town.
And then when did you start on the morning show?
I started on the morning show probably 1985.
So what was the big difference that made you go from doing something in the day and then get on the morning show and get your big break?
That's just the boss said go do it,
And he accepted $5 an hour.
and I'd work cheap too.
You were cheap.
Yeah, didn't I tell you that about radio people? I just want to be on the radio. I'll take it. I'll do it for free.
It really was a unique time, though, in the early days of KJ97 because the station was doing well, and they actually made me the program director in
At
the
the
80s.
same time?
At the 80s, at the same time I went on the morning show, and it was. And it wasn't. I didn't know much, but I was surrounded by people who would teach me. And so I basically got to learn on the job. A lot of people don't get that experience. I got to learn on the job with some really quality people above me in the company and consultants who would come in and work with us. So I learned a lot about the business as I grew, and the competitive situation wasn't all that much. So we were able to win, even with me not knowing anything.
That's good.
And so it's just a unique situation.
So back then you didn't have a lot of competitors on air?
No, we had competitors. They just weren't good. We probably weren't really that good either.
He's
but-
underselling himself.
but
He
we
really
were,
is.
We were better than the rest.
Yeah,
I
or
guess.
just a little bit better than the other ones.
Yeah,
that weren't good.
exactly.
I mean, Giovanni, you have to talk about that. You have lots of competitors in your life, in your business. I mean, is it just one little thing that can make others come to you versus somebody else in business? You think it could be the same way in radio if you're just a little bit different or have a little bit something else to offer?
I think early on with me, I'd studied my competitors because I didn't have anything. And then as I got bigger, I don't really worry about my competitors anymore. I kind of know where they're at, what they're doing, and I don't really worry too much about them. I just do my thing now just because we're on the map now. So early on, I'd study them and watch them and see my thing was. I would watch Facebook, which in the 80s, Facebook wasn't around, but I would watch Facebook and watch them go to bars and watch them, go party and stuff like that. And then I would work. And then I'd outwork them, so I can always monitor what they were doing.
Why does it seem like people really don't know to go on to that next step anymore? I mean, sometimes I think I'm a zillion years old because I'm one of those people that picks up the broom and starts doing stuff when you're finished with your job just to keep on going. But people don't know about that anymore.
I think it's just not modeled for them. That's really what it is. They're not taught. I mean, think about the things that we don't know in our lives. Most of the time, it's because nobody ever taught us. I mean, how many times have you stopped and paused and went, man, I wish somebody had told me that a long time ago, or I wish I'd learned that a long time ago. As we get older, we always do that.
I know, but I'm too tired to teach my kids that.
It's not easy to teach kids things.
It isn't, but I guess you have to have them in that social situation where you can have a working teaching moment. Because if you tell kids, I don't know, maybe just mine aren't listening to me, but you have to be in a situation where you can say, this is the time when you can be better than anybody else.
How do you do it with your kids?
How do I do it with my kids? Let me back up a little bit and talk about.
See, that means his don't do it either. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Randy.
No, let me back up and talk a little bit about my childhood.
Please.
Because your kids are going to learn things from you, good or bad, whether or not you're trying to teach them. I'll give you an example. I grew up in a household where in order to earn my dad's approval, we had to perform. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm,
You get that? And that's not normal. That's not right. That's your kids should be approved of regardless, of their performance. They need to be approved of because of who they are as human beings and their individual worth that they have. And that was not the case in my household. And so I grew up, racing motorcycles, jumping 27 trash cans on a bicycle. Well, I only jumped 13, actually. I was exaggerating.
You tried 27.
Yeah, but we did it playing music, swimming, playing football, playing sports, all that stuff to earn Dad's approval. And then I still entertain to earn people's approval. Right. My brother is a professional musician. He entertains to earn approval. So those things, that was one of the things that I learned that was not necessarily a good thing, but it benefited my life.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You might, looking back, might not think that it's so great, but it actually really worked.
Now I wandered off of your original question, which was, I can't remember now.
Teaching your kids.
Teaching
How do
your
you
kids.
teach your own kids?
Teach your kids. Well, I think again, it's modeling, it's example. It really is. I think that I look at the things that my kids have done well. Like my oldest daughter, her and her husband they're so smart financially. They're both 28 years old. But my daughter watched me handle our family finances. Not from the time she was probably, let me guess, she was probably about 10 to 12 years old. She watched me follow a guy named Dave Ramsey.
Right.
And get my
Absolutely.
financial house in order. And now, I didn't beat that over their head, but they saw it every day and they heard me talking about it. And so these kids graduated college with no school debt.
Nice.
They lived in a little apartment for 2 years, saved up $40,000 to put down on a house. Their cars are paid off. They have no debt other than their mortgage. And they've got all this equity in their house very early on. So, I mean, you just model that stuff, and hopefully your kids will pick it up and take it like they did. And I would love to. I wish somebody had done that for me. I'd be rich right now.
I'd say I know.
'Cause
You're right.
I've made a lot of money mistakes through the years.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, do you ever look back to your own childhood and say, how did that influence my life today?
Yeah.
Well, in
Not
what
all
way?
of them are good.
Well, nobody has
absolutely
all
not.
great memories. I mean, because when you said you were always trying to win your dad's approval, the first thing I thought of is in my mind, I mean, it immediately popped in that when we would clean the house, each of us would have a certain room that we'd have to clean, and then my mom would come in and check. We'd always pretend we had the white gloves and stuff, and she would always find one thing that we didn't do, like you didn't wipe the top of this or you didn't do that, and I was like, oh my gosh,
There's
this
always one thing.
always one thing. And so in my life, I continued to go up beyond so that there wouldn't be that one thing that was left. And it did and still does bug me, but I feel like it has been good in my life. I mean, but there's always going to be negatives.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think with you, I had same thing. No one really taught me finances, so it took me a long time to figure out that portion of it. And then once I figured, I was like, oh, okay, I can figure this out. But I wish someone would have told me that years ago. It's something you don't really learn in school,
Me too.
right? I mean, they don't teach it in school. I think one time they taught us how to balance a checkbook,
I-
but that was about it.
Yeah. In
And then-
college, I almost failed home ec, which was balancing the checkbook, mortgages, and all that. And I almost failed. And I was like, oh, gosh, I thought that this was going to be an easy class.
Home ec, they taught you how to do a checkbook, really?
Well, yeah, college level.
Well, I didn't go to
About
college, so I don't know.
mortgages and stuff like that. I thought it was going to be the easiest class until I was like, oh, man, this is really bad.
Now, being in radio, did you go to school at all for this?
I actually did go to San Antonio College. I was working at the little radio station in Pleasanton, and the general manager there insisted that I go take some courses. So I came up to San Antonio College. However, I was getting up at 4:30 every morning. I was going and I was doing the morning show on the little radio station in Pleasanton. And then I was carpooling with my buddy Henry Zamaripa up to San Antonio College, in our little, can I say POS?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Our little POS vehicles. we would drive to San Antonio College, and then I would sleep through half the classes,
Yeah.
And my general attitude about college at that time, especially when it came to radio, television, and film classes, and no offense to anybody out there who teaches in that realm, I was like, man, if you guys are so good at this and you know so much, what are you doing here? Is it just your love for me that makes you want to teach, or what it is? And so I ended up withdrawing, from school because I was so busy working.
So how long did you go for?
Oh, I may have went 2 semesters. So that was it.
That's enough. That's enough to know. And it's so funny that here we are today, and, both of us have 2 daughters, Giovanni and I, and we wonder about college.
We have 2 daughters. You have
Each.
2 daughters, and I have 2 daughters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We have 2 daughters each. and we always say, gosh, what's happening to the kids that get their degrees these days and are $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 in debt? is college the way it is. Unless you want to become a doctor or a lawyer or something where you actually need to know something.
So how did you teach that? Did your kids go to college?
My oldest daughter went to college. She went to Abilene Christian University, got a degree in marketing and advertising, and does not use it at all in her job.
There you go.
But I don't regret spending the dollars on that at all, because that's where she met her husband.
Oh, gosh. Thank you, Lord.
Yes,
Somebody to take her off of my hands.
Yeah, exactly. But no, he's a wonderful man, and they're both just brilliant and smart kids, and they're going to contribute a lot to the world. In fact, I'll just tell you, we're expecting our first grandbaby.
Oh, awesome.
nice.
Got a little granddaughter coming in early June, so we're excited about that.
So with your kids,
Amazing.
did you push to saying you need to go to college?
I did not, and certainly not with my second daughter, because she was immediate. She was like me. We're both riddled with attention deficit disorder.
Yes.
We're terrible in school, and she struggled to get through. I mean, they went to San Antonio Christian School, which is not an easy school to get through. My oldest daughter, who is the study one, doesn't have ADD, is focused, gets it done. She breezed right through there and on to college. There was no way my youngest daughter was going to go to college. She's like me. She's not happy unless she's singing, dancing, acting, entertaining, telling jokes, making people laugh. And so that's what she's pursuing, independent of college. She takes classes. She goes to improv and sketch writing classes and acting classes and things like that. But traditional college definitely would have been a huge mistake, waste of money.
Yeah, I didn't go to college either. But I always tell people I was smart enough to know that I was too dumb to go to college, because I was horrible at school. I couldn't. I took the co-op class in high school because I could go work. At least I knew I was decent at that.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem these days. We send a lot of kids off to college that probably it's not the best path for them. It's not that I'm anti-college. It's not for everybody. It's a waste of money, I think. Sometimes.
Well, especially if they don't have a plan and they don't know why they're there. My kid's in college. I don't know why. They've been there for 6 years and I'm in debt. But
Yeah, I'm more for trade schools.
Yeah.
People that can become plumbers or electricians or things like that. That can actually get an education that they'll go out and use right away.
and there are jobs open.
And I am for
them.
college also, but just for specific things that you make sure you know what you want to do.
Well, a lot of people in these trades are making a lot more money than people with the college education.
Yeah, I know. You know what I paid our plumber last year? Oh my goodness. For the company, the plumber we had crazy bills with him.
Yeah, I mean, they're making a lot of money out there, and they deserve it. They're skilled at what they do, and
Yeah.
we need them.
I know. He has a house in San Antonio. He goes to Port. I was like, "What do you go to Port?" He was like, "Oh, my house over there." I was like, "Oh my goodness."
Yeah.
He's a plumber.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Well, I think that the reason those jobs aren't filled is everybody had to go to college. It was like the next thing on the list that you had to do. And so that's why there's so many kids that don't have jobs. They went, now they have to figure out what they want to do.
Well, very little college. You get a little bit of college. You go through. You're working at the radio station at KJ97. What's the next step after you start in the morning show?
Well, I don't know. There was a next step. I've just kind of stumbled through this thing in a lot of ways. But like I said earlier, I was always surrounded by really good people who were guiding me, and so I was constantly learning on the job. I was getting hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of college education on the job by learning from some of the best people in the industry and getting to do things.
So who were your biggest mentors through your progress of being on the radio?
Well, a lot of people. John Barger,
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people in radio in San Antonio will know that guy's name. John's the guy who hired me. He could be a hard, obnoxious type guy sometime, but the guy had a heart of gold, and yet just watching that guy and his work ethic, I learned from that. We had a GM named Bob Cohen, who eventually became one of the vice presidents of Clear Channel. And Bob, I learned a lot from Bob. But then there were some consultants, Ted and Doris Stecker. I learned a lot from them. Ed and Pam Shane were some consultants out of Houston. I learned a ton from them, working with them for years. You learn a whole lot about your trade and every aspect of it.
Do you know what I always think of when I hear about those names that I've heard all my life in radio? I think to myself, is that one of the reasons that you may have lasted so long? From learning from them on what to do, what not to do, who to be, who not to be?
I think there's I think there are a lot of reasons I've lasted so long. One that I haven't touched on is I think there's just divine intervention.
Oh my gosh, we talk about that
Yeah.
all the
You
time.
know,
Absolutely.
I really do. I think God has a plan for all of us, and for whatever reason, this is His plan for me, because I don't think I'm the brightest person in the world or the most talented person in the world. Yet, I've always had things that have just fallen into place for me, and I look back and I go, even though I'm a hard worker, I don't know that I've worked really hard at my craft. I was interviewing an old country singer named Roy Clark one time, and Roy was 75 years old at the time, and I said, looking back on your career, what is your biggest regret? And he said, my biggest regret is that I never worked hard at it. He said, I just was lucky and I had great things come my way, and I wonder, wow, what could I have done if I'd really worked hard at it? So that's kind of the way I feel.
I believe exactly the same thing, and it took me long time to find out who was responsible for that path that was created for me. And finally, I know who it was, the divine, path that was created for me.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it a lot easier when people are like, he just gets things handed to him. He gets to be on no matter what he does. It's like, hey, I'm not the one in charge. Somebody else created this path.
Exactly.
As he mentioned Roy Clark, I wanted to see if maybe we could talk to him, Randy, next time about all of the stars he's met.
Yeah, I say we talk about the stars. And there's one other question that I have for Randy we'll talk about next time is going to be his biggest challenge or failure in his career.
Yeah.
That has really put him back or really had to fight through to get him to where he's at. So we can talk about that next time on the Art of Improvement. Thank you for listening.